Welcome to the Businesstalk podcast. I am your host Deepak from India. Today we are delighted to welcome Dr. Raphael Thomadsen, Professor of Marketing and the Chair of the Marketing Area at Olin Business School, Washington University in St. Louis, as our distinguished guest on the podcast. Dr. Raphael earned his PhD in Economics from Stanford University and has held faculty appointments at Columbia Business School and UCLA Anderson School of Management. He also served as a visiting scholar at the Kellogg School of Management, Northwestern University in 2025. His research focuses on quantitative marketing and industrial organization topics such as pricing, product design, and competitive strategy. And he has served in editorial roles for leading journals including Quantitative Marketing and Economics and International Journal of Research in Marketing. In today's episode, Dr. Raphael Thomadsen shares insights from his research study, the impact of advertising content on customer acquisition and retention for subscriptions of physical goods, insights from a field experiment. Let's not keep you waiting. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Raphael Thomadsen to the conversation. Professor Raphael, we are deeply honored by your presence and grateful for your time with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Professor, your paper challenges the discount first playbook for subscriptions. What convinced you that price-only messaging might be leaving both acquisition and retention on the table?
Yeah, so my co-authors, Kirthi Kalyanan at Santa Clara University and Nanzhao at Georgia Tech, and I were interested in studying subscriptions. And we were always fascinated by the sale of subscriptions for physical goods, things like pet food or Doritos or things like that you could just buy at the store without a subscription. Why would you buy with a subscription? And we noted that people sold subscriptions by giving a discount. We see this with Amazon often offering 5% off. We see this with the pet store that we worked with offering a large discount of 35% off a first order. And we kind of thought this doesn't really speak to the motivation of why you would have a subscription. And it's also very expensive to offer a discount. If you're offering 35% off, you're really giving up a lot of your margin on a first item, and you'll have to sell a lot of items later on in order to kind of make this break even. So we wanted to figure out, are there other motivations, first of all, about why people would buy a subscription? And I think we'll talk about those later. And then what happens if instead of advertising a price discount, we focus on what those motivations are in our messaging? Could we use that to sell more subscriptions?
Professor, in your 4-week email field experiment with a major pet products retailer, how did you design the different email messages so that content, price versus non-price benefit was the key thing changing?
Yeah, so we worked with a large retailer, and we worked with their subscription department, and we talked through to try to figure out what these motivations might be. And we came up with ideas that, people might, especially for items like pet food or regular types of purchases, they might want a reminder. If I just kind of set up a subscription, I don't have to remember to buy pet food. It kind of goes off my to-do list, and then I'm free to kind of focus on other things. Or some items might be really heavy, so maybe if we focus on kind of the convenience factor. So what we did is we then designed an email experiment where we had different emails inviting people, I should say, to buy a subscription, but we put different motivations, and we kind of switched the message in two different places. One was with the subject line. So when people got the email, the subject line had different motivations like save money, or let us do the heavy lifting, or things like that. And then when they open the message, if they open the message, the top of the message was different. So one might just say, save with the subscription. Another might say, set a subscription and forget about it, and things like that. So we had different messages in there. And what we then did is randomize who sees what messages. And we looked at not just how many people bought a subscription after this email, but we tracked them over time to see, did they buy a subscription and then kind of drop out, or did they buy a subscription and then stick with that subscription over time?
Professor, what were the specific non-price innate benefits you emphasize in the subscription emails? And how did you decide which benefits were most relevant for physical goods subscriptions?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So of course, when we ran our test, we wanted to have a price message in there because that's what people are currently using the most. But we talked to the company we were working with. We talked to many people, just customers, and tried to figure out, okay, you bought a subscription. Why did you buy a subscription? I would even just go to research talks and ask people, do you have a subscription? Why did you buy it? And we found that a few different reasons showed up frequently. So the conditions were a price condition, a convenience sort of message, that it's really convenient if you have a subscription. You don't have to go to the store. You don't have to lug things around. We had a reminder message, which is, set the subscription and then forget about it. Your stuff will arrive with it conveniently. We had another message where we thought that one thing that stops people from buying subscriptions is they may worry that it's hard to cancel. So we told them that we would let them know before the subscription arrived, so that if they didn't want the product, they could cancel very easily. And then we ran this during the time that COVID was a concern. So we had a fourth message that was about COVID safety at the time, which was attractive to a group of people for that era. So those were the 4 or 5 messages, I guess, 4 plus price that we ran. And what we found that all of the messages performed better than the price message, but especially the convenience and reminder messages, I think, really stand out as good motivations. Yeah.
Professor, your results suggest non-price benefit messaging can improve both signups and retention versus price only. What mechanisms do you believe are driving that lift?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the most interesting parts of our study, is that we look at not just customer acquisition, but we start to say the advertising you use might affect your retention rate as well. And the mechanism we think that's behind it is that when you use a message that has a motivation that matches the product, you get the customers for which the product is a better match. Here, our product is subscriptions. So if we use a reminder message, that appeals to the people where the benefit of getting a reminder fits into their lifestyle. And so once they buy it, they're going to stick with it a little bit more. Whereas if we advertise a price message, you're going to get the price sensitive people. Well, once the price discount disappears, the benefit for them has disappeared, and they might not stick with our subscription for very long. And so by matching the right people to the right message, you get, I hate to call them better customers, but from the firm's point of view, customers that will stay with them for a longer time and be retained for a longer time. And so you want to think about what type of customers are you attracting. And I'll just say, we observe some evidence that we are getting different customers. So I believe that a lot of this matching is unobservable, but we do see when you use the non-price messages, you tend to get the customers who have shopped with you for a longer period of time, have made more purchases, have spent more money. So we see evidence that you are attracting different sets of customers with the different messages.
Professor, you find the effects are especially strong among customers with prior experience in the retailer's e-commerce channels. Why do you think prior channel experience moderates response to content?
Yeah, the model in our mind, and I think that this probably works in a lot of contexts, is that it takes time to get customers to trust you and understand the process. So if we have customers who've never shopped with you before, trying to ask them not only to shop with you, but to shop with you and automatically keep buying is a really big step. They don't necessarily have the trust of you. They don't know what your customer service is like. They don't know how easy it is to return the products. If we then look at customers who shopped in physical stores, because the subscriptions could only be bought online, those customers at physical stores, they probably know our brand, know to trust our brand. They've seen that you can return the products, and they've seen the variety that you offer. But maybe they're not as familiar online with how things work. Maybe they're not as familiar with return process, and so jumping from not only getting them online, but getting them online on automatic purchase, where they might perceive that there's a little more risk if the channel doesn't work for them, is a little bit more of a jump. On the other hand, a customer that's bought from you before on your website, knows how the website works, maybe they've returned some items, they're very familiar with kind of how to navigate around the web page. Yes, for them, going from just a one-off purchase on a website to a subscription is a bit of a jump in terms of engagement with the company, but they have the experience to know that returns are fairly easy, to how to navigate it. They've seen that the navigation and the system usually works in the right way. If they've had anything go wrong, they've dealt online with the customer support and kind of seen that the company stands by the customer support. So it's easier to kind of convince them to take the jump and get the subscription because there's that trust and there's the familiarity with the interface. So that's why we expected, and we think is why we see that the customers who are already using our website are the most likely to buy a subscription. And once they're most likely to buy a subscription, matching the motivations ends up having the largest effects.
Professor, when you say causal estimates, what identification approach did you use in the field setting? And what were the key threats to validity you work hardest to rule out?
Yeah, so we ran this as an experiment with a very large number of customers. So we had over 8 million people, real customers, in our experiment. And we sent different emails to different customers. And we sent those emails out for 4 consecutive weeks. So they got a month worth of advertising from us. And the only difference between these customers was the message that they got. So randomized experiments should give you causal results as long as you have enough observations. So the threats to identification, the main threat that we have is that while we're sending messages to 8 million people, well, actually, as you can imagine, only a fraction of a percentage of the people end up buying subscriptions. And so the biggest threat is really just statistical significance, which even with millions of people can be harder to get than you would think. So that's kind of where we're at. But this experiment should be run cleanly. We did run randomization checks. It looks like the firm, of course, said that they randomized using state-of-the-art software, but we double check to see if there's any signs for a lack of randomization. Everything looks good.
Professor, retention is often harder to move than acquisition. What did you observe about how content affects early churn continuation for subscription buyers of physical goods?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you say is exactly right. It's really hard to switch retention in general, but especially for subscription goods. And here it's subscription goods that you can buy without a subscription. So if you want to watch, Netflix or TV on streaming, or you want to have electricity, well, the only way you can do that is through a subscription where you keep getting it until it turns off. But if you want to get pet food, you have no problem buying pet food from lots of retailers, including the one we worked with, just each time you need pet food. So, it's very hard to keep people with the retention. The way that we're changing the retention is we're not changing the retention of a particular person. Rather, what we're trying to do is help match the firm with the customers who are more likely to be retained. And so we're affecting the retention rate, but we're affecting the retention rate by changing who we end up matching with. And so I think that's an important philosophy for a lot of firms to have, that, okay, it's hard to change retention. What can we do about it? Well, one thing is when we get the acquisition strategy, we often think about that as a separate step, but we need to think about those two as moving in tandem. And what is best for the first purchase is not always the best for the long term. I think that's a mindset that I would hope that maybe some of the listeners would take away.
Professor, one of your most managerial findings is the counterfactual. Switching from price only to a reminder message for 1 month could add 968 subscribers and $155K in subscription revenue. That is plus 6.1%. How should managers interpret and not over-interpret that counterfactual?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that this is quite a remarkable result, which you have to understand. Our company didn't just send out one email per week. We only touched the email that they sent out for soliciting subscriptions. They actually sent out lots of emails to customers, and customers who are active on their mailing list would actually get numerous emails from this company each week. And what we're saying is just changing the content of one of those emails and nothing else gives you, over $100,000 per month, into about 1.5 or 1.8 million over a year. And what I think is amazing is this is such a small part of their overall advertising, and we're just changing a small part and having an impact. And I think what it speaks to is if you changed and optimized, all of the messages that they were doing, you could actually make a substantial amount of money. And so to me, I think that's kind of a surprising result, and one that also explains probably why a lot of these companies end up just emailing. It seems like sometimes they email too much. I actually personally think they probably do email too much. But when you can just turn on a lever and get so much money right away, it's pretty tempting for companies, and you would really have to look at the long term and think hard before you shut it off. At a minimum, you really want to think about what message you're sending out. And so that's the message I would take away.
Professor, based on your findings, how would you recommend brand sequence messages over the life cycle? Like discount at sign up, then benefits reminder, or benefits first, discount later, or segment by customer type?
Yeah, so I've presented a kind of a simplification of the message, which is we find that non-price messages tend to perform better than price messages. And I suspect that that is true for a wide number of industries. But I think what's most important is figuring out what is the motivation for your customers, whatever firm you have, and then trying to match the message to those customers. So we actually do find some evidence that there are some customers that respond best to the price message. So I shouldn't even say that price is never the right way to go. Rather, I think what managers have to do is think about what motivates each of the different segments that they have. And the more that they can segment based on motivation or the benefits that they're getting out, the more they might have insights into what motivation for subscriptions might stick most with those segments. So the main thing I would give as a message is try to match the message to the motivations of the customers. For us, one thing I will kind of say as a caveat, we give them one set of messages and then we just follow them through. We weren't able to get the firm to kind of change different messages down the line to see which ones might shift retention. Should you have initially one and then later a different message? I think that's a really interesting and important point that you raise. It's not one, unfortunately, that we can answer here. But I think that getting the right message is important. And then once you get the right customers who get the benefit, the last thing to tune, and we weren't able to do this, but I think the next question on subscriptions is, can you figure out a way to help people get the right frequency of the subscriptions? That's the number two threat, I think, once you get the people signed up. So that's kind of the advice that I would give managers trying to implement this.
Professor Raphael, I would like to conclude this episode with one last question. If a retailer wants to replicate your approach, what are the minimum data signals they need to target content effectively? And what metrics should they track to detect both short-term acquisition gains and long-term retention effect?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a great question. I think each firm will have different data available to them. The more you can get variables that let you segment different groups of people, especially the more that segmentation is based on the benefits or the motivation for why they buy your product, the better off you are. But, if you don't have the segmentation variables, the minimum you would need to do, randomize, create different messages, randomize who gets what messages. You need to truly randomize that. And then, send it out. But I think the key is where people make mistakes is they send out a message, they look at who responds just to the first offer, and they assume that that's that. What we find is what you want to track is how many of them buy from you twice, how many of them buy from you 3 times, how many of them buy from you 4 times. And we see that sometimes it takes a few different purchases to kind of get the clarity of kind of how much one message outperforms another. Now, at least going to 2 messages gets you a lot. I would say 3 or 4, is even better. We found that you get a lot more clarity by tracking a first purchase, second purchase, third purchase, so on, rather than how many people are still with you 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, partly because people tend to pick different gaps of time between subscription delivery, and you just get more noise with the time approach than with the number of purchase approach. But if you just track people, first purchase, second purchase, third purchase, that's probably goes a long way to telling you which message is performing best.
Thank you, Professor Raphael Thomadsen, for joining us today and for such a clear, practical discussion on how advertising content shapes both customer acquisition and retention in subscription businesses. I especially appreciated your insight from the field experiment context, how moving beyond price only discount messaging to highlight non-price benefits can improve sign-ups and retention, and how the effects can be particularly meaningful for customers without prior and with prior e-commerce experience. And the managerial takeaway was compelling. Even a simple shift in message strategy, like relocating customer from a price-only email to a reminder-style message, can translate into material subscriber and revenue impact. On behalf of our listeners and Business Talk, thank you again for your time and for sharing your research and perspective. We are grateful to have had you on the podcast, and we hope to welcome you back again soon. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much. I'd love to be back again. Thank you.